as, people say a lot of balls in the air. I kind of see them as balloons, not balls. Because if you've ever hit a balloon up, you can hit it and it kind of slowly comes down.
It slowly comes down, right.
Divert your attention from it. So a lot of it is just triaging what needs to be done that day, what's highest priority. If there's a big crisis, you divert your attention over there and work on that. And then as this balloon is falling, as it gets to the bottom of the pile, you kind of bump it back up again and work on this thing until it starts to come down a little more.
Until it is. And, you talked about 13 different directions. And I'm just going to put this on pause for a second. Yep. So we're back on, and I was talking about, you were talking about 13 different areas. Are you talking about chairs? Department chairs, or maybe, how does that work?
Sure. I oversee the registrar's office, so I have the registrar. I have 3 academic success coordinators that all work on different things. The 2 honors program directors, so the first year honors and honor scholars, academic enrichment, disability services. Sure, I'm missing people. The advising office.
All different, though.
So all different. They're all, I would say, they're all under the umbrella of academic support services, with maybe the exception of the registrar's office is more an operations kind of thing.
Right.
But in the budget, I oversee the budget.
And you oversee the budget as well?
So all of the, I would say budget and registrar kind of operations. The rest of the areas I help support are mostly student support areas, academic support areas.
So as a leader, how does your brain break down into 13 different ways to make this all come together? So now you're sitting at a meeting with your boss,
yep. And
he's saying, okay, Carrie, tell me how all of this pans out. Like what does it do? Retention's such a big thing. How do we address that? Wait. So then you're breaking all of that down tactically. Is that essentially right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So you have to inspire a lot of people in all these different areas. What techniques do you use to make it happen? How do you inspire them as a leader?
I think you'd have to ask them, but what I try to do is I don't see the relationship as sort of I'm their boss or they're my subordinate. I think that we're all one collaborative team, and that we all might have our role on the team, and my role on every team that I supervise is I'm kind of the big picture for the team, and I might meet with the advising office on Monday and academic enrichment on Wednesday and connect those two together.
Connect those two together.
But I think they all have their part to play, and to get them to think beyond just sort of, all right, my piece is to provide the tutoring support for these students,
right.
And if they're not doing well in this section of their class, like that's not my problem. My problem is the tutoring, and sort of to get people to see, yes, you have your specific role, but you need to see beyond your role, and how does your role support other roles on campus. And if a kid is having trouble and they need tutoring, they might also be having trouble registering for classes, which then becomes an advising issue. Or one of our initiatives we worked on was ESL support. And so it started as it was going to be some classes in academic enrichment. And then as the ball got rolling, we started to think about, all right, well, if they're having trouble with language, they're maybe coming from a different country, we probably also need to pull in student affairs to support them in the residence halls. And then we need to pull in the registrar's office, because maybe their classes are going to be smaller than other classes. So to kind of, I had that big picture, but then to pull all the pieces together into a collaboration where they're all talking to each other.
That's amazing, because one of the conversations I was just having with Dr. Sabaki was that emotional intelligence plays such a big picture. And the thing is, if I was a consultant for many years before I got into education, and my job essentially was to go fix leaky pipes in an organization. Like, where's the communication breaking down? What's going on? What's happening? And what I'm finding is that you, in a similar way, have to find out where the leaks are, but also where the connections are to that leak. So so the idea is, how do I get into the different departments to find out exactly where the problem stems from?
Yep.
That's huge. I mean, going into all those different areas.
And even with like academic support, we haven't done so well this semester, but we usually try to meet once a semester, or once a month, with the whole team, so that we then identify what are our goals for the year, what are our projects, and then everybody kind of feeds in and knows what everybody else is doing. So.
I find this interesting. Although you have a formal role on the managerial grid, as a leader, you said, and this is as a leader, you said, I don't want them to look at me as their boss, which means that it's not an autocratic, dictatorial type of thing. It's all about an orchestra, and you're the conductor.
Yeah, that, and I would see myself as kind of the facilitator. So I think when I've had new people come on board that I haven't supervised in the past, I meet with every person I supervise every other week. And in the beginning, when I go to the meetings, they're like, okay, what's the agenda? And I was like, I don't have an agenda. Like, you tell me what I can do to help you. And our meetings are really, what are you working on? What do you need from me? So it's not...
What resources do you need?
Me telling them, you need to do this, this, and this. I might give them ideas, but it's really sort of, how can I help you do your job and move the organization forward?
Yeah, but this is modernistic 21st century thinking. Where we are always planning for successorship. We're always planning to see, okay, where do we go with what we have? And if I weren't here to do it, could you pick up the ball and make it happen? So it's about resources, right? So a leader inspires others, from what you're telling me, to bring out the best. Like, what do you think of Steve Jobs? I mean, like, people say he was so crude and crass, but he got the best out of everyone. How do you bring the best out of your team? Not saying you would have his tactics at all, no way. But I'm just wondering.
I mean, I think my team are pretty much day-to-day in the trenches, so I think sometimes they get themselves bogged down and can be kind of, sometimes our meetings are kind of their criticisms, their complaints, and sort of to not approach it as, well, let me tell you, like, this is the way that it needs to be done, this is how you need to think about it, but to kind of validate, yeah, you're in the trenches and you're dealing with these students every single day, and it's not sunshine and rainbows every day, it's hard work.
Oh, yeah.
So I think validate their experience, and then they're in their positions because they're the experts in those areas. So to kind of listen to what they're saying about what's happening in their area, what do they need to happen in their area, and not that we can necessarily do it their way every time, but to understand where they're coming from. And then if we're not going to take that idea, or we can't do that thing right then and there, I think it's also really important for somebody in a leadership role to be clear. So to not kind of hedge, like, well, I don't know, but if I can't do it, I say I can't do that now, but let me tell you why I can't do it, and let me tell you how we might be able to do that in this time frame. So to kind of help them plan, strategize.
Again, giving them resources. This could be answering a lot of my earlier questions of how did you move up so quickly? Obviously, letting people play their own instruments and not telling them how to play it. They're here because they were hired because they had the skills and the abilities. But that's one thing. The skill set is one thing. And so I just have two real quick questions. The first one is, how do you create a culture with a 130 plus year institution that's moving into the 21st century?
I think it's hard.
It is.
Because I think there are people that have committed their life's work to this institution and I think we have some of the best people around that really are committed to students. And sometimes that butts up against, Curry used to be a very small institution, and you could kind of do things a little bit informally.
Without going through, I don't want to say all 10 layers, but it gets complicated.
Yep. And as we become more complex, and somebody calls me and says, I want to add this kid to my class, and well, you have to fill out this form. And why do I have to fill out a form? Can't you just? So I think it's sort of getting people on board, which I think we've done through the strategic plan. It was pretty an open process, a lot of vetting.
Yeah, everybody vetted into it, yeah.
A lot of sharing of information and even the little updates on this is what we've done.
Yeah.
And I think once you have that kind of vision and plan in place, it's easier to change the culture. So if we say we're going to try this hybrid initiative because it's part of the strategic plan under this direction, and if you think you're an expert in that area or you want to learn more, come help us. That people kind of get on board a little quicker when they feel like they're part of the plan and part of the change, rather than it being imposed from Dave or myself saying this is what we're going to do. Yeah,
that's part of this. So would it be fair then to assume that you are Dr. Dave said he was a very Y leader. How would you look at yourself and with McGregor's, remember the good old Douglas McGregor theory, X theory, Y? He was more facilitative than autocratic. How would you look at yourself as a leader?
I think it depends on what I'm doing.
No, that's okay. That's fine. I mean...
But I would say 95% of the time. It's more that I'm there to facilitate the process and get people...
engaged?
Even if I know where I need to go when I go into the meeting, to not start with, this is what we're doing. It's sort of, this is where we've been.
I've been at several meetings with you. You've never done that. You've never done that.
And kind of to facilitate the process of conversation between people, sharing ideas, and then if something bubbles up out of that, then how do I then help that group get that idea to fruition?
That's 21st century thinking. Mm-hmm. So and one final question.
Sure.
What advice would you give to anyone who aspires to be a leader? And being a young leader yourself, you know what you've...
And I don't know as if I necessarily aspired to be a leader. I mean, probably the most, I think, learn from the people around you. So surround yourself with good people. And I know before I moved into this position, I thought long and hard about what would it mean for my personal life, my professional life,
sure.
What kind of people did, and I had a very steep learning curve. So I went from being a faculty member to an administrator and had no idea sort of where I was supposed to start on day one. So I think don't be afraid to ask questions. So I think sometimes people get into leadership positions and think they're supposed to know how to do everything and don't want to ask how to do something or for clarification because they think that might reflect that they don't know what they're doing. I would say good leaders ask a lot of questions.
A lot of it's transparency, would you say?
Yep. And I think that's where I've gotten into trouble sometimes with the faculty, is when we do things and maybe aren't as transparent as or don't communicate as well. Maybe it's not transparency, but we don't communicate as well as we maybe should sometimes. And it's because it's my day-to-day life, and I think, of course, people know this, and I sometimes forget that I didn't communicate it to the faculty in a way that I should have. So I think communication with people, and then I think really just surround yourself with good people that can support you, because I know even though there's 5 of us in this office and we all have very distinct roles, there's not a day that goes by that somebody's doing something that's not in their job description because somebody else might need help that day. So I think don't ever think it's anything is below you. I've gone and moved furniture. I've
seen you do it
for people. So I think I would say a good leader would not ask other people to do anything that they wouldn't
do
willing to
themselves. Yeah.
So I think all of that goes into, if you aspire to be a leader, you have to treat people well. I think that's one of the reasons I've been able to be so successful at Curry is I came in and I was the only person in my department, so I had to collaborate with other people to get anything done. And I think moving into the dean's office, that served me well, because I then had those relationships built that I could then, if I needed something, go back on those.
But also we promoted from within too.
Yes.
And that's a positive thing.
Yep.
And well, Dr. Coakley, this has been a wonderful, wonderful interview, and I really appreciate having this time with you.
Thank you.
As you're welcome. As an administrator, but more than anything, as a colleague and a friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That was